Hello and welcome to another episode of the MiamiHal Real Estate Show, where every single week I've got a great guest sitting in the chair right next to me. This week is no exception. You know how I say this every time we have a show. Sharon Kerwick, thank you so much for being here. Sharon is an appraiser, and it's not the type of appraiser that you'd expect on a real estate show, but it's going to tie into that too.
Yes.
So, Sharon, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And you came on the show because you have a really deep history in doing appraisals. And I'd like you to briefly tell the audience kind of who you are and how long you've been doing what you do.
Well, for background, my family moved to the Fort Lauderdale area in 1920s. And I heard about the storms of 26 and 29, which we now call hurricanes. Growing up, I ended up getting into the field of appraising personal property. So some of you might be familiar with the Antique Roadshow, things like that.
Sure.
I've been on that, and that's the things that are in your house, the stuff. The other things that are personal property are things like automobiles, boats, anything that you can move. Now, the real estate is things that you can't move. It's attached to the ground. So I work with a lot of real estate appraisers because they need someone to come in and often have the owners get real about how valuable their items are if they want to sell furnished possibly. They love their 1950s French provincial bedroom set, but it's really not very saleable right now. So I'm the devil's advocate in those cases.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it for about 50 years in the Fort
wow.
Lauderdale area, Palm Beach to South Beach. And I love it. It's just really interesting field.
As part of your introduction, you said you came to the area in the 1920s.
Well, I didn't. My grandfather did.
Grandfather. I
And-
misspoke. And there were some storms around there that weren't even called hurricanes back
Right.
then.
I don't know when the term hurricane started. I should look that up.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing this, we lost your cousin in the storm of 29. And this was particularly in the 60s when I moved back from Heidelberg, Germany to go to school here. And I didn't know what they were talking about because I hadn't been in a storm. I'd been in snowstorms in Germany, but not in a hurricane. I learned quickly into the next year or so because we had a couple of storms in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I have now, my husband and I have been married for 60 years, owning houses, and have been through a few hurricanes. In the 1992 Hurricane Andrew, I had a claim for hurricane damage myself. My insurance company, USAA, sent a very nice young man to the house. They tend to have a Southern accent and drive a pickup truck when they come here. They're from Texas or Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And I had a lot of Oriental rugs, which I'm a specialist in, and art that didn't look like it was real valuable, but was very valuable. So the minor water damage I had, and talking to him about the wet rugs, which I had taken to my rug cleaner, he realized that I was someone that the USAA insurance company needed to have working with them. So for the next 4.5 years, I was heavily training and working with the insurance adjusters in the area for USAA primarily, and a few other companies. And I loved it. The Oriental rugs in the military was something that a lot of people had, and it was something that is difficult to know, is that a $50 rug or a $5,000 rug? And that's what I can do.
Got it.
So,
And you bring up a very good point, which I really want to drive home to the audience, which is appraisers aren't for the ultra wealthy. Appraisers can be used in a number of different situations. And in particular, since we're in South Florida, hurricanes is a great reason
right.
to inventory and know the value of your stuff should the inevitable or the unfortunate happen, and that being a direct hit from a hurricane or a fire or a flood or something. So tell us about the type of customers you have and what you do to prepare them so that if something bad happens to their household and their items, that they're prepared.
Well, if I have a chance, like we are doing today, I try to get people to photograph their contents.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want to do is shots around the rooms, each of the rooms. I have information on my website that you can go to about what I'm talking about. I tell people, stand in the middle of the room and look at the door and can think of that as 12 o'clock. So the first picture you're going to take
Okay.
is 12 o'clock and 1 and 2 o'clock.
Meaning you're in the center of the
you're in
room
the
and you
center of the
point to the door,
the
to the
door.
exit door.
And then you're starting around the clock. The next picture, you're going to take 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 4 o'clock. You're overlapping the pictures as you go around. And then remember to take the middle of the room, because the coffee table and the Oriental rug underneath
I'm
it
standing
is
on the coffee
important.
table, though.
But if you just do that, and the thing about a hurricane is you can do this while you're waiting for it to come. When you're stuck in your house
Okay.
and you need your phone or a camera.
That's not too late?
No, no.
Okay.
Because you don't need those pictures until you're asked for them. The insurance company assumes you have an inventory or a record or some way to prove what you had. And now in my case, my art in my Oriental rug collection is not normal because I'm a knowledgeable collector. But a lot of times when I go into people's homes, it's their furnishings are important to them. Their family photographs that they lose, the items that you just don't even think about. And if they had the photographs, at least they'd have that memory in the thing. The other reason is when you have the police coming to your house and you say, well, the TV was stolen and the tea set, the Sterling tea set. If you have a photograph, that's a big help. It's proof that you had it, but it's also gives them help. They look at the picture, they say, well, it's a Sony. Do you remember what size it was? So when they go looking at pawn shops or wherever to find it, or they do happen to come across it, you have proof that it's yours. So the photographs are an easy thing to do. I have mine on my fancy camera, which is a Nikon, and I've taken a lot of photography classes, but your phone works just fine. But make sure it goes to the cloud. Make sure it's backed up somewhere, because the worst thing that could happen is all those pictures are gone when
the house or the
when the phone
items,
is stolen.
Yeah. Okay, true.
But most people these days have a backup.
Cloud backup.
And that's something, like I said, you want to open the closet doors in your bedroom. You want to take, like in my case, a lot of clothes and then the shoes. I have friends that pay a lot of money for their sneakers. I think that would be something to document. If I was putting a claim in and I said I had 14 pairs of expensive sneakers, my insurance adjuster might question that. But if you have a photograph, that's great.
How do you handle the kitchen? Because the kitchen obviously has a lot of cabinets. You hide your plates and dishes and
I open
flatware
all
and
the
things.
doors and all the drawers, and then I take 4 or 5 pictures. I just take a picture that will show all the top cabinets, because I can blow it up. I can have a picture
zoom in.
of a lot of things. Whoops. I can take a picture like this.
Yeah.
And it shows a rug, it shows my family photographs, it shows some art. And then if I have to, I can print it out and I can say they took this, or the roof was leaking and everything was ruined. So that's the type of thing that I suggest doing.
Got it.
In your garage too. People don't think to take the picture. You have a lot of things in your garage, I bet.
And the other question I have is, do I only take, I know you said do your clock
right, 12
photos
o'clock
in each
all the
of
way
rooms,
around.
But should I take close-up photos of the things I think are more expensive or special pieces, or does everything need to get detailed pictures?
What I usually tell people is the magic number, and I'm not supposed to tell you this, for insurance companies is $5,000.
Ah.
If something's over $5,000, you better take a serial, your big screen TV, you better take a picture of the serial number. If your art is over $5,000 or you think it is, you want a picture. And if the signature is there, you want a picture of the signature. If it's under $500, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Your used clothes, your kitchen, everyday wear. But if you have a set of sterling in one of those drawers, you want to open that drawer and take a picture, and maybe take one fork and take a close-up so the appraiser can look up the pattern and see what that set's worth. So it's or 5 photographs usually does a kitchen pretty well.
Along the way, you talked about artwork. And not many of us have ridiculously expensive art, but you have and I did this because you have a story here too.
Yes.
Right. So what if I am an art collector and I have a dolly hanging up on my walls?
Then
she's going to
you
her
have
folder,
a good
folks.
chance that it might be real.
Okay.
Because in South Florida, about 50% of the dolly art that I see
I never knew that.
is fake.
Oh, I thought you said it was in Florida.
Well, in South Florida, I can't say that for Ohio or Texas or California. But in Southeast Florida, where I've been looking at dollies for 50 years, about 50% of the ones I see, the paper's not right. It's a copy. It's printed. Someone could copy, but it's not on the right watermarks. It's not the right size. He was European. He uses canvases that were the size that was standard there. American canvases tend to be 8 inches by 12 inches, 36 inches by 48. That's not what a European. It's little clues like that appraisers need.
You've got a photo, right?
Yes, I have.
And maybe even a quick story that you could tell us about that.
Well, one of the things that I was going to show you was this is one of my favorite pieces of art. It's a souvenir from when I was on the Antique Roadshow. The framing was about $300. The coaster was about $39.
Okay.
So my insurance claim would be what, $350? Because of the size and the frame, it's under that $500 magic number. When I showed this to an insurance adjuster for a claim, this is a small print from the 1920s by a famous arts and crafts artist, Gustav Bowman. It's worth $8,000 to $10,000.
Wow.
And that record is recent. I mean, he's been getting 5,000-6,000 for years, and then recently, the arts and crafts are very popular. So this is in my dining room. It's small. Most people, I don't think my grandkids would realize if something were to happen to me and they were liquidating, they would put it in a garage sale. So I have a book that's called a binder called Art with information and printout of auction records so that they might not do that.
This in the garage sale.
Right. But that's just an example. It's a simple, beautiful little print, but it's not even a big oil painting, which maybe would make you think it's valuable.
Got it.
So
now I'm going to circle this around a little bit, because when people buy a home, particularly those that are getting financing, there needs to be an appraisal. And it's very different from what you do, or maybe there's some similarities, and we're going to get to those. With an appraiser, they come out to the home and they are trained in how mathematically to calculate square footage and what, price per square foot for that area. And if it's if it's a C1 or a C4 home, that's the level of finishes and the age of it goes into those C numbers. And ultimately, they come up with the value for a home. And I always tell a buyer and my sellers as well, listen, one appraiser to the next, you're not going to get the same number. So with all that training, there's got to be some art to this, right? There's something that each individual appraiser brings to the table that can give, it's not a significant variation, but there's variation to what the appraisal comes back at. So can you explain why what is this art? And maybe you've got a different term for it.
Let me think. Probably the best way to explain this is people come to me to get training. They think they want to be an appraiser. And often they're already in a related business, like they're an antique dealer or they've had a small gallery. And they think it's an easy transition to become an art appraiser or just a general personal property appraiser. The thing they say often is, I have an eye for things. I know what's good. I'm really good at finding top things. I find that that's not really good in the sense that their limited exposure is going to affect what they're doing. In South Florida, what I see in Palm Beach, the city of Palm Beach, and what I see in South Beach are very different. And my profession uses a lot of research. I pay thousands of dollars for databases that tell me that my piece, my Bauman print, was sold 2 or 3 times in the last 2 years.
Ah,
It might be sold at Sotheby's for $10,000. It might be sold at a lower level, maybe Heritage in Texas, for $8,000. It depends on the auction and what other pieces are in that auction. So we have to learn to do the research. It's similar to real estate in that a small print is worth less usually than a big print. Not always, but so the age of the product is important. The material
it typically goes up. For a real estate transaction, if the
goes
house
down
is from 1950, it's going to be less value than
this piece would,
okay.
if it was in his later period when he was frail and colorblind, it wouldn't have worked as well. So there's a lot of other things that we kind of keep an eye on, but we have similar things in that we have to rely on our experience and our training, and we have serious courses for doing this, but you really can't be a good personal property appraiser without relying on auction records, museum people that were willing to talk to you. They won't talk value, but they'll say, yes, there was a good show recently. I don't know if you heard about it. A exhibit like Frank Steller in Fort Lauderdale, his prices went up after that show was exhibited in the Fort Lauderdale Museum. It's a kind of a similar but not the same profession.
I think you and I were talking just before the show started. I said I call the differences between two real estate appraisers as an art. Like there's mathematics underneath, but there's a little bit of art thrown into that. And you said, no, it's really more experience.
Right. I think it's experience, because the use of the word art just assumes a different connotation. Okay. Yes. So I'm trying to be polite.
with your experience explanation, you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, over 50 years.
So, and I'm not taking anything away from you. You've got 50 years of that experience. Could somebody that really, is voraciously into doing appraisals, but they've only been in business for 10 years, could they have equal eyes and ears
they
as
could
you do?
Be just as good as I am at it. When I started, we didn't have the internet. I couldn't look up auction records easily. I made friends with a gentleman at Sotheby's, Bill Ruprecht, who had just started there in the Oriental Rug department, and I was doing a museum exhibit of Oriental rugs, and I needed some input. We clicked, we spent hours together. He became the president of Sotheby's years later. He retired a couple of years ago. He helped me a lot because I could call and say, I have 50 jute boxes in an estate and I don't know anything about jute boxes. Can you help me? And he'd say, I have somebody call you from that department. It might be someone that wouldn't answer my calls or wouldn't be real helpful. They might have been an intern, but when the president says, call Sharon in South Florida, I was able to help with a lot of estates that they handled and sold for people in the South Florida area. The people now have an advantage because of the tech skills. When I go to conferences, sometimes that's what I'm lecturing about. I'm showing them tricks to how to go into eBay Advanced. We don't really care what that item is selling for. We care what it's sold for. Just like the house, it's listed for $2 million. It sells for 1.5. It's listed for 1.9. It sells for 1.5. You have 3 at 1.5 for similar neighborhood houses. That's your value.
And we haven't used the term yet, but it's exactly right. You're looking for real estate appraisers. They're looking for what are called comps or comparable properties. So they're looking for things that are sold within the last 3 months, not something that's on market today, but things that are sold, which means there actually was a transaction for that dollar amount.
Right.
And we're looking for homes that are of similar size and as close to the subject home as possible. It's a little bit different, but you have comps for these appraisals, and you're probably relying mostly on those, correct?
Right. And if there's, say, 3 or 4 comps, and one of them's quite a bit off from the others, you try to have a relationship where you can call the auction house and say, I'm curious, what happened? And they'll tell you, well, there was a snowstorm that day. We didn't get the turnout we expected.
Ah.
That can affect the values. Or, well, somebody passed a rumor around that it wasn't right, and meaning that maybe it wasn't the right signature, it was the right, it was not as real as the other 3 comps. So you have to be able to follow up on that type of thing to do the best job you can. Now, if it's a minor piece, it doesn't matter. If it's the dolly that I had to appraise for U.S. Marshals when they seized it, the dolly painting, it's important that you talk to the right people.
And you had said to me that I've got a book in front of me, Sotheby's, right?
Right.
And Sotheby's, all kinds of automobiles in here, and they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about some of the stories that you have, because over those 50 years, you've got some stories to tell about customers and pieces that were unique, and there's a little something different that's memorable about that.
Yeah, that particular auction, somebody should really make a movie out of. A gentleman and his wife and I believe it was 10 or 11-year-old daughter were in their car on the highway, and there was a terrible accident. The driver was killed, the wife was seriously injured, and the daughter was killed. He was the owner of this classic collection. He was ready to open a museum of his own with his own name and have a lot of his wonderful cars and the accessories, the other pieces that went with cars, in the museum in the Orlando, Florida area. When he was killed, his wife did survive, but the estate decided that they needed to sell some of this. She decided, and it was stored in a lot of different places. I was asked to by the attorney for the estate to do the appraisal. I said I could do it, but I would be calling in other experts. I'm not a car person. I drive the same 5-year-old Toyota Sienna van. I get a new one from the same salesman every 5 years for the last 30 years. That's my car experience.
It's not like you're a routine person.
Right. So I had a fellow appraiser come in from Texas who was an expert in the area. I could to do a lot of the silver items and a lot of the art and the furnishings, but it was an auction that Sotheby's ended up doing at the Breakers in Palm Beach. They were trying to establish at the time a other than New York place to have auctions. And it was wonderful. And it's something that I have fond memories of and photographs of with some of the celebrities that came to bid on the cars. They ended up, it didn't really work out, continuing to have it there. And but it was exciting, and this was again my friend who was the president of Sotheby's at the time.
So I'm holding up the book, and I turn to many of the pages, and I find something very interesting. First of all, there are some car collectors that would kill that there's writing inside this book.
Oh, those are all my notes from being at the auction.
I understand. What's interesting to me is there's printed values for some of these items, and almost every one of your handwritten notes is a number that's significantly lower than what's in the book. So what did you learn, and how did you come up with those lower values on these items in general?
Okay, that's a whole nother story. A lot of the items were stolen before the auction, but after the catalog was published. And they were recovered, almost all of them. The police in Palm Beach did a very good job and all, but I have to be careful what I say about that, but it influenced in some ways. Not the automobiles tended to all go higher than the estimate, millions of dollars for some of them, but the smaller items, the silver trophies and things like that, they tended to, the estimates were put on in a published catalog before the theft happened. And the story, I don't really understand emotionally why that would make a difference, but that's what we kind of figured it was. People hesitated paying more than the estimate.
And before you answered, you said, I have to be careful about. And I find that very interesting because before the show, as we were preparing, you said, listen, a lot of what I do is private,
Yeah.
and I'm not allowed to share a lot of my stories, and it's for good reason. So I did want to kind of take a pause and tell the audience that, when you have appraisals done, if you're concerned about pieces being known about, that you possess them,
Yeah.
you don't have that as a problem,
Yeah.
because
If
work
you
with
hire a professional
appraiser,
not a liquidator, not someone that's job maybe is to get stories out there, is what we do is very confidential. I have, people I can talk about because they've given me permission, but there's a lot of stories that you would love to hear that aren't going to be talked about. No,
Okay.
it's very confidential.
Yeah. And and you asked me, and I'll just tell the audience, when you do a home appraisal, it is the person who pays for the appraisal that has control over that. So in 99% of the cases, it is a buyer who says, I'm under contract and I need to make sure I paid the right amount. And their lender is the one that typically tells them, hey, you need to have an appraisal. So the buyer is who pays for the appraisal.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought the bank paid for it. The buyer
the
does.
bank orders it, but it is paid for by the buyer.
Okay.
And so in reality, when you get a home appraised, the only person that has rights to that appraisal is the buyer, because they're the one that paid for it. And then, of course, if they want to have the money for the loan, they have to share that with the bank. But the seller does not have right to see that appraisal at all.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
It's only in negotiation where it makes some sense. Hey, we paid on the contract, we're buying the home for $1 million, but the appraisal came back at $950. Then it might make some sense for the seller to see it, because the buyer can say, listen, I wanted to pay you $1 million, but my appraiser and the bank tells me it's worth $950, and that's all I can pay you. So there is some confidentiality, but it's shared for for negotiation reasons. But for you, if somebody hires you and they say, I want this confidential, it is forever confidential.
Right. Yes.
You said that you have a website with some more information, because we're actually running out of time. So I want to make sure that the audience knows how to get in touch with you and how to learn more about what you do.
Okay.
So
my website is my business name, Kerwick, KERWICK.com. And my fees, my credentials, and this type of information you can find there.
That's great. How about one more story? What interesting thing that you are allowed to tell us?
How about the dolly story?
Yeah, we started on the dolly, but we didn't get very far. So let's do that and wrap up the show.
Yeah, and this is a piece of art that I was called by the U.S. Marshals. I do a lot of work for government agencies. They said they had the young man that called me said, my boss said I had to call you. You're the appraiser, and you have to go to the fortress and meet us to see this painting. And I said, can you give me any information? He said, well, the person we seized it from said he paid somebody to do it and to sign it Dolly. I said, thank you. And we set the appointment. I then got my art expert, because I'm a generalist, but when that type of name comes up, I have to have the expert come in. So he and I went and met the U.S. Marshals down at the Fortress in Miami. And when they opened the container, this was the only thing in it. It was a very large painting. It was about 10 foot high. And it was painted for a opera that never got produced.
Wow.
And so it was sort of an unknown. It had never been published, etc. So there was a good chance it wasn't right. The experts that we use are often the person who either worked with the artist or they wrote a book, a catalog raisonné. So Albert Fields in New York was the catalog raisonné author. I contacted him, and for $500, he sent me a photograph of himself and Dolly in front of this painting.
Wait a minute. You just said that the appraiser that you brought in was in a picture with Dolly himself.
No, not the appraiser I brought in. Albert Fields, the expert.
Oh, that's right.
The expert who had been his assistant for many years.
Was in the photo
and
with
he
Dolly
was in the
painting
photograph.
that particular
and it was a Polaroid photograph. And he sent it. It cost $500 for him to do that, which is fine. We were happy. That authenticated it. And the government ended up auctioning it off for a lot of money. So
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a
So
fun thing,
you-
and I got permission to talk about it.
You're not only a 50-year appraiser, but you are a very well-connected and respected appraiser. And you work with the government and you work with some pretty high-level people.
Yeah,
I would say.
I'm very fortunate.
So you saw the website scrolling on your screens, folks. It was a pleasure to have you, Sharon. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate your time, and you have so much more to explain. But
we'll have to come
unfortunately,
back.
not in the show. Yes, you're welcome to come back, but more importantly, please go to the website, and that's a way to contact Sharon and find out what's really going on.
Okay.
Until next time, have a great week in real estate and appraising.